I received a call from our dispatch to check on the well-being of Mr. Wilson. The front door was unlocked. Walking into the back bedroom, we located Mr. Wilson on the bed. There was a lot of dried blood coming out of his mouth, down his chest. It had pooled in his lap and also under his head.
There was blood clearly on the ceiling and wall and soaking the mattress. It looked like he had been inside the home for a few days, deceased.
We found that Steve was stabbed 4 times in the back and shoulders, and then 4 times in the neck and head area. The fatal wound was to his spine.
The stab wounds were, so severe they broke through bones.
There was no forced entry at the residence, but we did locate some watch boxes that were emptied out around the vanity.
We could never locate those in the home, so we assumed they had been stolen. As we continued the investigation, I noticed that all of the cigarette butts were white Marlboro cigarette butts, but when I opened the lid to the ashtray and the cup holder, there was one brown, cool cigarette butt. I believe that it had to have been recent. The DNA from the cigarette butt may point us towards a suspect. The one thing that stood out were some Cash App transfers to a person named Daniel Diamond around the time that we believe he died. We learned that she was an escort that Steve Wilson liked to frequent, and she would come to his house. We started to recognize that that's going to be her street name. And just a Google search located some selfie photographs of a white female with red hair. We entered into a mugshot recognition program, and we were able to match it to Paige Lane.
Paige had an extensive criminal history. She was an escort, and she frequents hotels around St. Louis County area. I also found body camera video with her.
Police department. Is there anybody else in here?
Yeah.
Who is in there?
My boyfriend.
There was a black male in the room with her with the name of Sidney Bias.
Do you have a probation violation? We got to give you a new court date. And I know you're also soliciting.
Sidney Bias had an extensive criminal history of violence and drug-related offenses. He was a documented gang member with Gangster Disciples, and he goes by the name of King. We believe that he was Paige Lane's pimp. On the night that Steve died. She had progressively gotten closer and closer to the house till she was just outside of Steve Wilson's home. We were able to go obtain video footage from those locations. We saw that she had left a hotel on March 31st at around 11 p.m. She was with a person who appeared to be Sidney Bias.
A mile away from Stephen Wilson's house in Wentzville, Paige was seen at the gas station. When the tags were ran, we came up with the name of Sidney Bias as the owner of the vehicle.
However, we could not determine if Sidney Bias was actually with her during that time at the gas station.
Yeah, long time no see.
That's a little bit.
Cool Blue 100, please. Cool Blue.
We discovered she had purchased a pack of cigarettes. We recognized immediately that the cigarettes that were recovered on scene matched the same pack of cigarettes that she had just purchased. Shortly after that, we found a text message from her to an unknown number stating, "I'm going to kill him." She returned to that hotel around 4 a.m. wearing different clothes. The DNA was a match to Paige Lane. We put all manpower into locating her.
We found Steve had text conversations with Paige Lane to to the fact that he had given her money to help out with her children. I think he almost thought that they were like boyfriend and girlfriend.
But in the recent weeks, Steve Wilson seemed pretty upset. He accused her of leading him on to gain more money from him. And then shortly after that, we had messages sent by Steve asking other people to post negative reviews on her escort ads.
Stephen was trying to burn her pages. Burning an escort's page limits what type of clientele they get. Steve is taking away her business.
If she was not able to earn money, then she wouldn't have been any good to Sydney, her pimp. Between the two of them, that would definitely be a motive to kill Steve.
Steve was just like a kid at heart. He was so happy. Steve's daughter was his entire world. He was at every activity that she had going on. He didn't miss not one. He had pictures posted everywhere around, all her accomplishments and how her grades were doing. He was a proud father. And he loved rehabbing those cars. And he really had his heart set out to fix them for his daughter. He's like, when she turned 16, this car is hers, this car is hers. She was everything to him, and he got taken away. He got taken away.
They believe Paige Lane was residing at a hotel near the airport in St. Louis. About 45 minutes into doing this actual surveillance, we observed Paige Lane leaving the hotel with City Bias.
Police units converged on their vehicle, and we were able to take Sydney and Paige Lane into custody. We kept them completely separate from one another the entire time. We knew that if he was involved or had any involvement in telling her to do this, that it would be very difficult for us to get that out of her because there's a fear relationship between her and her pimp.
The challenge is Sydney had an extensive criminal history. He's been through this before. They were looking to feel him out first to see how he was going to react.
So who were you with today whenever you got picked up? Paige. What's Paige's last name? Lane. Is that is a girlfriend of yours, or how are you guys associated with each other? Straight up, man.
Be on and off sometimes, have sex. Stuff like that.
Okay. What does Paige do? Does Paige work?
You would have to ask her. I don't want to, because I know she got a warrant. I just don't want to kill nobody.
We know what Paige does. All right. So we can talk open and honestly about it. I know she solicits herself for sex. Okay, that's all right. You can. All right. Would you say that you help her manage that?
No.
You're not her John?
No.
Okay.
No, nothing to do with that. No.
Never ever.
No. This has something to do with solicitation or something?
So what, man? It's a little bit more serious than solicitation. Okay.
You know what's that right here? At all.
Never ever. Never ever seen that man.
Never. You never seen me? Never.
But have you ever heard of the name Steve Wilson?
No. Man, she knows.
I'm just kind of come clean. I don't know, but we're investigating homicide.
Okay, I'm not involved in no homicide with nobody. This person right here? I don't even know him. I never seen him. He never seen me. I don't even know him.
And we have quite a bit.
It don't got nothing to do with me though.
That's not true though. We know that's not.
Okay, I don't. There's nothing I can tell you because I don't know nothing about this, and I know y'all got to be lying.
You think we would be lying about something of this magnitude?
Yes.
We do have a lot of evidence that suggests that you were involved in a homicide. Okay.
You can't.
Hang on one second. But in what capacity, we don't know.
You
So
can't.
this would be your opportunity to go ahead and come clean.
You can't.
And tell us in what capacity you were involved.
I don't know this person. This is what I'm telling you.
Did you know what was going to happen when you went out there? It would have been the middle of last week. You weren't out here over the middle of the night?
In Winsville? No, for what?
It was pretty easy to recognize that he didn't want to provide any information, especially about Paige. Between his drugs, his escort racket, and this murder being investigated, there's little incentive for him to talk to us.
At all. I don't even know this person. It seems like y'all trying to like frame me for something, to be honest. Oh my God, you guys are f***ing nuts!
We'll be right back with you, buddy.
He was not intent on cooperating in any fashion, but we wanted to keep him to see if any information would come alight from Paige's interview. Our hope was that she would give us information putting him at the scene or involved in Steve Wilson's murder in some fashion.
All right. Now, here we want to talk about. So, what was your name? So, we know you're just with
King.
Sydney.
Yes.
Oh, he goes by King?
Well, I mean, that's what I call him.
So, who is he to you?
That's the man who raised my son. So it's not his blood father, no. He helped me when...
So do you guys live together or stay
No.
together? Did you ride with him today? Do you ride with him often or?
No, not really.
Okay.
We've been broke up since mid last year.
There's no other friends of yours that maybe give you some money or help you out financially?
I mean, like, I had, like, no, I was like a sugar daddy for a while, I guess you could say, quote unquote.
I mean, sugar daddy, what are you talking about?
Like, he would send me money, help me with my kids, help me get around.
Who was that?
So, his name is Steve, and I don't know his last name though. But I haven't seen him because I haven't been talking to him, and like, what do you think was maybe February? Was the last time I've seen him.
And this is the same person we're talking about right here?
Yeah.
She says that she last met with Steve in February, but we know that she was meeting with him in March and getting money from him in March. We knew she was lying the whole time right off the get-go.
He had a lot of contact with a lot of people.
Right.
You ever see anybody at his house when you were over there?
No, but like I've had like other girls call me because like he messaged a whole bunch of, because he was mad at me.
Yeah.
Like he messaged a whole bunch of girls, like other workers, and told them to set me up, to beat me up,
like
to beat me up, to oh she robbed me, you know, no, and girls are calling me, and girls
set you up to beat you up?
yeah, like yeah, and to burn, like quote unquote burn my page, you know, say this, that, you know, or whatever, because like, he was mad. What is going on?
We're kind of going through all his contacts to find out who was the last people there,
Okay.
you know, that could have done this to him.
So could have.
So that's what we're talking to you, because
Okay.
we believe you're one of the last people there.
Oh, okay.
Right when he brings up about we're investigating something with Steve, then all of a sudden both shoes come flying off. The nervous twitches with her are all over the place. Most people that are innocent, they're not so fidgety, you know.
So on your cash app here,
That's a different one.
there's a camera. We're going to try to work everything out. On yours, you know, we located some documents that we had some questions about. One of which was this one right here.
What is this? Okay, wait.
This is a screenshot
Okay,
from your account on March 31st at 23:46, which is 11:46.
Okay. Yep, that's his house.
Okay. So that's what I'm asking you about. You said you went there since February, and this is
Right.
from March
I
31st.
went down the street and picked up another girl.
That was at his house?
Yes. She didn't have a right.
Was the other girl seeing Steve?
Yes.
And who is she?
But she goes by Mish.
Niece?
Yes.
So
But
where did
she
you pick
saw-
her up at?
At the end of the road.
So you didn't go in his driveway?
No.
You
No.
didn't go in his house?
No.
This was from the cloud,
Okay.
from your old phone.
Okay.
The location that you're telling us doesn't match up. I didn't know exactly what happened, you know,
I sat in the passenger seat and waited for it.
where?
In the driveway.
In the driveway?
Yeah.
What did you do during that time?
Sat there and talked on the phone and played on it.
Was Stephen with you there?
No. No, he was not there.
Okay, so none of the area checks for the device IDs or anything like that's gonna show him being there?
No, he wasn't with me.
Not at the street or anything like that?
Up the street, he went somewhere in Wentzville, but like I didn't connect with him or anything.
Okay. Did you smoke while you were there?
No. I mean, in the car.
So
Yeah.
you're telling me you were not in his house?
No, I was in his house since February.
Okay. So you understand that anything that you touch leaves DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's only unique to you?
Mm-hmm. I did not go in that house.
You didn't?
I did not go in that house.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Because Steve's not here to tell us. Okay. So that's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the first time I actually saying.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm not hearing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
When you bring up Steve's name, it's a, you know, a little laugh. She's thinking hard now. The wheels are really turning in her head. It's the time to really start buckling down on her. We know you're lying, so you need to start being truthful with us.
I'm just telling you that you're saying you never went in that house that night. The evidence inside that house from your DNA suggests otherwise. You have all his phone text messages, all that text messages, all your messages, all your location data, all the accounts data.
Right. Okay.
And consistently just goes back to you. I'm talking to everybody who I think had possibly had contact with him during the time frame.
Like you're accusing me.
Okay. So just because someone ends up dying doesn't mean it's a murder. Obviously, we think worse.
Right. No.
When we have evidence, we have to follow the evidence.
No. I trust me. I understand.
I would love for you to explain to me what happened and how it happened so that I can understand.
I truthfully don't know.
I don't believe that's true.
I did not go in
Based
that
on the
house.
evidence we have, I can tell you that's not true.
Steve was a funny person. He was always laughing, always smiling, but I felt that he was lonely. He started using other means of dating women, and I told him that lifestyle that he chose at that particular time, that is a dangerous thing. It made no sense at all.
So I just need to understand and be able to reason why you're in the house.
I wasn't.
That's not meshing with the evidence we have. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I truthfully don't even know what happened. Like,
I believe you do know.
But I don't.
It's very tough to stay patient when the lies start getting circular and they're not changing, and you can't break out of that. It becomes an issue because you're at a dead end.
All right, I'll be right back. You smoke. I'm gonna grab your phone, okay?
Okay.
So at this point, I asked Detective Sergeant Meyer to be part of the interview. He has more of a softer approach. The both of us in there together, maybe she would feel like she had somebody on her side.
I'm sure you guys already talked about this.
Right, no, yeah.
When you went out there at the end of March, beginning of April, and you were with a friend.
Yeah, and she messaged me about it.
So this gal that was with you, that you drove out to Steve's house,
Mm-hmm.
You don't know her real name or anything like that?
No, I don't know. No one, no.
So that night that you went out there, how did you get a hold of her? How did she get a hold of you?
She had one of my phones. But so I let her have it that night.
So there's ongoing messages between this account back and forth. The last text in that thread said, "I'm going to kill him." They were sent from a text app registered to this Gmail.
Okay.
So who would have sent those?
Like I said, she had my other phone. There was a app, you know, so she could text her clients.
Well, she's not texting.
Right? No, she told me she accidentally messaged him.
So you're saying that's the only possibility, that it was her texting this stuff?
Yeah, because I did not.
And then she wrote out there with you.
Right. Yeah, she said she had a visit out there. Yes.
Okay.
You understand why it's really important for us to get hold of this nest girl?
Yes, in my life.
Right. So.
My freedom, my kids.
Hey, who was this with you?
That's what I swear I'm not gonna lie. I'm not lying. Oh my God, I'm fine.
Listen, it's okay. I'm sure there's reasons or understandable reason for what happened that night. I don't know what it is. I need you to help piece it together so we can understand this.
I'm literally telling you what I know. I'm not gonna take the rap for anyone.
I hope.
I love my baby. I love my kids. I want my life back.
Your kids need you. And let's get to the truth, okay, Paige?
We need to find the story that actually fits the facts, and that's what we're trying to do. You know what I'm saying? I'll meet you at one.
Okay. You understand what he's saying?
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I do. I did not visit with him.
In a setting like that, the table creates a barrier between you and them. So I made a decision to move my chair closer to her. I don't want to be behind the table. I want to open up to her as I want her to open up to me. Here I am. Focus on me. Tell me what happened.
Okay, something happened that night, and we need to figure it out, okay? Paige, you're in the house. Okay? We gotta get past your story, okay? The story's broken, it doesn't fit. That's science talking. That's not me thinking this or him thinking that. That's science, okay? How did you go? What time did you go into the house?
I saw him earlier that day. I popped up and saw him. That's it. Like during daylight.
Who did you go out there with during the day?
Myself.
So you went out to Steve's house earlier in the day, and you saw him. What time?
He messaged me actually a couple of like saying like he broke his foot, and I guess I felt bad for him. Like I said, like that's why I always messaged him. You know, I genuinely like felt bad for him. Mm-hmm. You know, like I don't know.
Did Steve out there give you anything? Any jewelry, any mementos, any items, any money, anything like that? Did he give you anything when you were there?
No.
Anything at all?
No.
When I was out of the room, we learned that when the investigators initially went to Paige's hotel room, they found several watches. We knew at Steve Wilson's home there was a large jewelry box, which the jewelry was clearly missing out of. And we were able to determine that the watches that were in her room did in fact belong to Steve Wilson.
There's some watches, I guess, in your hotel room?
Yes.
Who are those?
They are in here. Well, I mean, who did...
What do you think the odds of those watches having Steve's DNA on them are?
I'd say pretty high.
Huh?
I'm saying pretty high.
She told me they were in here.
Who's supposed to be in here, dude?
Nested. Fucking 6 days ago when she stopped by.
Stopped by 6 days ago and gave you those watches?
Yeah, she said she's going out of town.
Well, you don't know what town, though.
No, I didn't ask her where she was going. or anything, but, you know, she said she was going, like, she said Chicago or Kansas City, you know, she said she was going up that way. But I don't know which one, like, she stopped at.
Obviously, those were lies. You gotta be patient, let them tell you half-truths until the half-truth becomes a full truth. And we just had to push her over the edge to get her to say it.
I know you're saying that this anonymous nest gave you the watches, but it's just one more of those factors that I'm telling you that when you put it in a line of everything going on and now you have his watches.
Like, I trust that I know, like, I don't, the whole street guy, I think that whole life, like, that's never me, that's not me. I'm the game warden. I don't break rules, I don't cover for people, I don't take for no one. I'm not losing my babies for no one.
It looks to me like either you went over there with the intention to kill him, or you went over there with the intention for something else to happen, and it went bad, and he ended up dead. That's what it looks like, one of those two things.
There's something that you're not telling me. Exactly, listen to me. There's definitely something we've been doing this long enough. I can tell when people are not telling us the whole truth. You've been full of half-truths all night long.
I didn't send anything out. I don't know. I really don't. I didn't kill him. I didn't even go with it.
You lied to us earlier. You lied to us several different times. And you came out earlier and you said, well, you know what? I was there earlier in the day. That's
right. I did.
Okay. But that took forever for you to get that little bit of maybe truth out of you.
I don't know how to play the murder. I don't know.
So the real truth here is that if you don't tell us what happened, you're not going to see your baby's story.
The whole time in the interview, it was a battle to get her to tell anything that was truthful. She's given it a little bit at a time. Eventually, you have to quit with all the niceness and be stern with somebody.
So it'd be murder at this point because nothing can be justified in what happened. And for murder, you're going to sit down on it. 20 years. Now, you understand the difference between murder, right, and manslaughter. You have to tell us what actually happened in order for us to be able to do anything other than that charge. That's the only charge that fits right now. You've given us nothing. Out there, this man's dead, you have his watches, you were in the house. I mean, like, texting him about, I'm gonna kill this guy. Like, it looks like it was completely planned and set up to go murder this dude. So, if that's not the case, then you better start 100% information because otherwise you sit down on a murder charge, you're not gonna see your kids. Like, that's the only thing you can do.
There's no difference between anything.
There's a big difference. What do you think?
There's not.
Oh, absolutely. There is. A murder charge is life in prison with no probation.
Yeah, the years you serve. That's the only difference.
Yeah, and manslaughter people get 3 years. It beats the hell out of 20 with no probation. But what do you think would happen if you get convicted of murder? Like, something happened, and the only way out of it, and the only way to see your kids again within the next 20 years is going to be legitimate, tell the truth, so we can get it figured out. Without that, it's 20 years.
There's remorse. Or there's nothing.
And you keep talking about your kids and that, like, this is your opportunity to be able to see your kids, to be not in a mass security prison somewhere far away, to not be locked up for 20, 30 years.
Things would happen after. And I don't want any more. I want the truth.
We're getting somewhere real close now, breaking her down a little bit. And at that point, I noticed she really starts rubbing on her wrists and her arms, in one spot in particular that appeared to have been a cut. So I call her out on that.
What happened to your armpit?
Did he do that to you? Did he make that mark on your knife, or what? What happened? How did your arm be cut?
Protected myself.
What happened?
I've been hurting for money lately. And so I went to go take the visit.
Was it nighttime or daytime? I'm sorry?
It was at night.
At night. Were you by yourself or did he with you?
I was by myself.
So what happened when you got there?
I walked in. He gave me a hug. I told him I want to go back. I sat there on the couch for a while. We went upstairs and I wouldn't get undressed. And like you told me, like, come over here, you know, you send me $100. Like I said, I don't do anything for $100. Like he was like sitting on his bed and he's taking his boot off and I was standing. And then he got mad at me. I should have turned around. I should have walked away. But I stood there when he yelled at me, "You bitch," and came toward me. He grabbed one of his knives and he came towards me and I put my arm up and I got that cut and I grabbed my out of my pocket. I don't know. Like, I know, but I don't know. Like, what happened? I don't. Like, I never.
He came at you and cut you, and you pulled your.
I pulled mine out, and like when I pulled mine out, like I hit, like, you know, not like accidentally because I was like defending myself, but like I hit him like on the side of his neck, and
like this or like this?
No, like I. So like he came and I was like and like I turned and mine was in my hand and I went like, you know, like to backlash like at him.
Backhand?
Yeah, like to, you know, like I just grabbed it and you know I grabbed my arm and I was like no, you know, like freaked out and I don't even know. So like then him he came and I was like I went like this way and oh my gosh, because like
Did you like go towards him to get him, or were you like away, or?
No, I stayed crouched down. I crouched up and protected myself like this, and it was just like closed eye, just like stab, you know. And then I like peeked, and he was just like looking at me, you know, really briefly. It just all like flashed.
Scared you?
Yeah.
We know how Steve Wilson was murdered. He was stabbed in the back with a violent force. Clearly, as she acted it out, it does not fit the evidence. She made some backhanded stabbing motion gingerly towards him. Well, we know that's not possible given where the stab wounds were located on his body.
It was a freak out panic. I
check him or anything? Like check
no,
his pulse or
no.
Try and wake him up, shake him?
No.
You just thought he was dead though.
He looked like it. I don't, like, it was like it all happened so quick. I wanted to call, but like,
Do you think about calling the police or the ambulance or anything?
Yeah.
When you're worried about getting in trouble?
I'm sorry. He should have called me. No, he should have.
When something accidental happens, you're going to stick around, make sure somebody's going to get the help they need.
Obviously, I didn't believe it was self-defense. Those were lies to, you know, minimize your involvement in any kind of crime.
And then what happened after that?
I left, and then I left, and with the watches he had stuff like backed up like on the side or whatever. I know some of my blood got on that bag from like when I turned, and that's why I grabbed the bag.
The bag with the watches.
Yeah, and took it with me.
take anything else with you?
I threw a phone. Yeah. With the knife.
Where are the clothes you were wearing?
I threw them away.
Where at?
In a dumpster downtown.
Did you talk to anybody else about this?
No, like I've been drinking a lot.
What were you worried about? Your reasons you said you were going to call the police, but then you were worried.
Because it was a murder. I know. Like, that's all I thought.
He knows he's got her on the ropes. You're so close. You're so close to telling the truth.
It was like it all happened so quick.
Hands off your chest, though.
I'm sure it weighed heavy on you. Especially because you said, you kind of hit a soft spot for him because you felt sorry for him and everything.
Like, I really did.
I believe you.
It's my nature, like, compassion. Like, I help people. That's what
Like I said, we're clearing it up. We're telling the truth now. We're on the right track.
Yeah. Like, he doesn't know what you guys told him.
There's still some inconsistencies in your story, and I appreciate that you are, you've taken the leap, okay? You're telling us stuff, but there's some things that still don't add up.
Okay.
So I want you just to backtrack to where you're up in the room and tell me exactly what happened in that room. No extra, no bull, just straight up honest truth, please.
I would have never hurt him, hurt anyone unless it's just me and myself. I wouldn't. And he posted on one of the indicator sites, saying I'm a robber and I stole from him and all this, and all the girls were calling me and all that, and I was losing a lot of money. And so, I initially went there to get him to take the post down.
Is it still up?
No, he took it down.
Oh, he did. Why you over there?
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that you get there and you text that I'm going to kill him. And then you go upstairs with Steve and he's leaning over the bed.
Well, I initially helped him with the boot.
Okay. And then bend him down in some way because the way the wounds are and how his hands work, like this, like you're obviously behind him, and stabbed him.
Right, because when I pulled out my hood, like I said, I
understand what you're saying, but I'm telling you that based on this and the angle where he was and sitting and how you describe the situation doesn't match. It doesn't match the wound. It doesn't match the force necessary to be generated. It seems more like you would have been maybe kneeling on the bed behind him, but just stabbed him.
I wasn't I wasn't directly behind him. No, my armor, so that's a little bit of adrenaline rush.
So you're still thinking that he made that cut on your arm at this time?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's still the story you're keeping?
She's making the story up the way she wants to tell the story, not how it really happened. We've got a confession that she stabbed him. Boom. That's what you needed.
We've got enough on you. We're going to take you to jail, and we're going to get charges on you for homicide.
Nothing else in your pockets? Just get us over.
I had some information from Paige that Sydney had driven her during the night that Steve was murdered. Because Sydney Bias was her pimp, we thought maybe he had forced her to handle the situation in whatever fashion she could.
You know what we're talking about? Why would any of this have something to do with me? Because it has to do with Paige. And you and Paige have been seen together quite a bit. So Paige killed the man. Those y'all told me she killed the man?
It looks that way. She said that you gave her a ride to get Niecy. They went out to this man's house, and that you weren't there, but you were in the area.
No. That's not what, she couldn't say that.
That's what it sounded like her exact words. You weren't there, but you were in the area.
Okay, how I wasn't there, but no.
That's what I'm asking. How are you not there, but in the
I'm
area?
trying to tell you, I don't know nothing about nothing, man. This is what I'm trying to tell you. These people I don't even know.
Okay, let me ask you about something you will know.
I think I know.
Because we had you on the camera at the hotel, and she was telling us that you guys had left that night together on March 31st in your car. Shortly after that, she ended up at Steve's house. I know that because I got evidence of that. My question is, were you with her or not?
What is this evidence? Hell no, I don't even know. Listen,
I'm not saying you're
I don't even know this person. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay, I just want to be clear that you did not drive her to that man's house on March 31st in '95.
No.
Sydney did ultimately let me look into his phone and where his location data would have been saved. And it was just inconclusive. So we decided to go ahead and let him go.
All right, man, time to go.
There's no evidence to show that he was there or had any involvement.
We were able to determine she acted alone.
Cool Blue 100, please. Cool Blue.
She took Mr. Wilson's life. You know, she's got to pay her time for that.
There's a sense of relief. That confession was earned. You can never bring nobody back, but you can do what you can to put the person that did it in prison for as long as you can.
I was glad that she was caught. It's hurtful when you lose someone, but when it's senseless, it's even worse. It hurts more than just the person that has left the world. Steve will always have that special place in my heart regardless. He's always going to be a good friend to me.
The Christmas lights of Boulder, Colorado, were still flickering against the pristine, snow-covered lawns of the upscale Chautauqua neighborhood when the illusion of American safety shattered into a million jagged pieces. It was December 26, 1996, a morning wrapped in sub-zero temperatures and biting winds, a day meant for unwrapping toys and drinking hot cocoa, but instead, it became day zero for the most controversial, baffling, and infuriating unsolved murder in modern history. The grand, Tudor-style mansion at 755 15th Street stood as a monument to wealth, success, and the ultimate American dream, home to a self-made multi-millionaire tech executive, his elegant socialite wife, and their two beautiful children. But behind those heavy wooden doors, nestled beneath the towering pine trees laden with heavy winter snow, an unspeakable horror had already taken root in the dead of night, while the rest of the world slept in peaceful holiday bliss. The clock struck 5:52 a.m. when the silence of the Boulder Police Department dispatch line was pierced by a frantic, breathless voice that would haunt investigators for the next 3 decades, a voice trembling with a mixture of terror, desperation, and calculated panic. Patsy Ramsey, a former Miss West Virginia and the matriarch of the household, was on the other end of the line, screaming that her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet, the reigning little beauty queen who had captivated pageant audiences across the country, had been stolen from her bed. The mother's voice rose to a screeching, hysterical pitch as she demanded that the police arrive immediately, claiming she had found a 3-page, handwritten ransom note left on the back staircase of the sprawling, 15-room labyrinthine home. It was a highly unusual, extraordinarily long demand for $118,000, a precise, puzzling figure that exactly matched the corporate bonus her husband, John Ramsey, had received earlier that year. The initial responding officer arrived at the mansion within minutes, stepping into a chaotic, emotionally charged atmosphere that would instantly compromise what should have been a pristine federal kidnapping investigation. Friends, neighbors, and the family priest were already flooding the home, walking through the hallways, touching surfaces, comforting the distraught parents, and inadvertently destroying the microscopic evidence that could have pointed directly to a killer. The house was treated not as an active, secured crime scene, but as a crisis center for a grieving family, a catastrophic tactical error by a small-town police force entirely unaccustomed to high-stakes abductions or wealthy, influential suspects. The air inside the house was thick with tension, confusion, and the overwhelming scent of expensive holiday cooking clashing with the cold, sterile dread of an impending nightmare. Hours ticked by with agonizing slowness as the FBI was notified and a technical team prepared to trace the anticipated ransom call, a call from the mysterious group calling themselves an international foreign faction that would never actually come. John Ramsey sat in a corner, hollow-eyed and distant, while Patsy wept openly on the sofa, surrounded by a tight-knit circle of affluent friends who whispered prayers and offered useless words of reassurance. The house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded cage, its labyrinthine layout of interconnected staircases, hidden playrooms, and deep, dark basements concealing a truth so dark that no one in the room was prepared to face it. The police, focusing entirely on the perimeter and the logistical setup for a kidnapping drop, failed to conduct a thorough, room-by-room search of the massive residence during those critical early morning hours. By early afternoon, the atmosphere shifted from frantic anticipation to a suffocating, heavy despair as the noon deadline specified in the bizarre ransom note passed without a single word from the alleged captors. Detective Linda Arndt, the lone investigator left at the mansion to monitor the family, felt a growing sense of unease, a chilling realization that the dynamics within the house were shifting from panic to something far more ominous and unreadable. Seeking to break the paralysis that had gripped the home, she suggested that John Ramsey and a close family friend search the house from top to bottom, looking for anything out of place, anything that might have been missed in the morning confusion. John Ramsey agreed immediately, moving with a sudden, purposeful urgency toward the lowest, most isolated level of the house, the dark, winding basement that sat beneath the grand living quarters. They descended the narrow wooden stairs into the damp, chilly subterranean labyrinth, navigating past a train room, storage shelves packed with seasonal decorations, and old furniture covered in dust sheets. John led the way directly toward a small, windowless room at the far end of the basement, a space used primarily for wine storage, a room that had been bypassed by the initial officer because the door appeared to be latched shut. With a swift movement, John opened the door and flipped on the light switch, illuminating a sight that would instantly transform the kidnapping case into a brutal, horrific homicide investigation. There, lying on the cold concrete floor beneath a white cotton blanket, was the lifeless, rigid body of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey, her tiny arms stretched over her head, her lips stained a deep, unnatural blue. A guttural scream tore through the basement as John Ramsey scooped up his daughter's stiffened body, carrying her up the stairs and placing her on the living room floor in front of the horrified detective and his screaming wife. The scene erupted into utter bedlam as the realization washed over everyone in the room. The predator had never left the house, the ransom note was a sham, and the child had been dead for hours, right beneath their feet. The pristine little beauty queen, the girl with the dazzling smile and the glittering tiaras, was gone, her body bearing the horrific marks of a sadistic, methodical, and deeply personal attack. The marks of violence on her small frame were shocking, contrasting sharply with the festive Christmas decorations that still adorned the walls around her. The immediate examination of the body revealed a level of brutality that sent shockwaves through the Boulder police force, instantly shifting the gears of the investigation into high alert. A thick nylon cord was wrapped tightly around her neck, attached to a broken wooden stick that had been twisted to form a makeshift, highly professional garrote that had slowly, systematically strangled her. Another piece of the same cord bound her tiny wrists in front of her, though the knots were loose, suggesting they may have been placed there after she had already lost consciousness or died. Her skull had suffered a massive, 11-inch fracture caused by a devastating blow from a blunt object, a strike so powerful that it had caused severe internal bleeding and brain damage before she ever stopped breathing. The horror deepened when the medical examiner discovered evidence of acute, immediate sexual assault, alongside signs of chronic, past trauma that suggested this was not the first time the child had been subjected to abuse. The juxtaposition was sickening. A little girl who spent her weekends in sequins and heavy makeup, parading under stage lights as a miniature adult, had met her end in the dark, cold belly of her own home. The media, catching wind of the gruesome discovery, descended upon Boulder like a flock of vultures, turning the quiet, upscale town into a global media circus overnight. Satellite trucks lined the snowy streets, and cameras were trained constantly on the Ramsey mansion, capturing every movement of a family that was quickly transitioning from grieving parents to the prime suspects in their own daughter's murder. From the very beginning, the case was plagued by a fundamental, ideological rift within the law enforcement community, a civil war between the Boulder Police Department and the district attorney's office that would cripple the pursuit of justice. The police department, viewing the bizarre ransom note, the lack of forced entry, and the highly unusual behavior of the parents, became instantly convinced that the killer resided within the mansion's walls. They looked at Patsy Ramsey's handwriting, the fact that the notepad and pen used to write the ransom note came from inside the house, and the highly specific financial figure, and concluded it was a staged crime. They believed a family member had snapped, committed the murder, and then frantically constructed an elaborate, theatrical cover-up to protect themselves and their remaining child, Burke. Conversely, the district attorney's team, led by Alex Hunter, urged caution, pointing to the total lack of a clear motive, the absence of physical violence in the family's past, and the presence of unexplained physical evidence at the scene. They argued that the theory of an outside intruder could not be dismissed, pointing to an unidentified footprint near the body, a broken basement window, and an unknown DNA profile found on the child's underwear. This deep, bitter divide created an environment of leaks, mutual distrust, and strategic maneuvering that allowed critical leads to grow cold and crucial witnesses to remain uncooperative. The public, fueled by a relentless, 24-hour news cycle, watched in fascination and disgust as the case transformed from a tragic murder mystery into a sordid, sensationalized soap opera of wealth, privilege, and dark, hidden secrets. The autopsy report, released to a ravenous public amidst a storm of media speculation, provided a clinical, terrifying look into the final hours of JonBenet Ramsey's short life. The document detailed a harrowing sequence of events, suggesting that the child had been struck violently on the head, rendering her brain dead or unconscious, before the garrote was slowly tightened around her neck, finishing the execution. The presence of pineapple in her stomach, partially digested, introduced a new, confounding variable into the timeline, as her mother had consistently maintained that JonBenet was asleep from the moment they arrived home from a dinner party until the discovery of the note. Yet, in the kitchen, investigators found a bowl of fresh pineapple with a large serving spoon, bearing the fresh fingerprints of her 9-year-old brother, Burke, and her mother, Patsy, suggesting someone was awake and eating in the dead of night. This tiny piece of dietary evidence became a cornerstone of the police theory, a silver bullet that seemed to puncture the family's alibi and suggest a dark, late-night confrontation over a simple snack that escalated into a fatal outburst. The police posited that Patsy or John, exhausted by the holiday rush and pushed to the brink by a bedwetting incident or a sibling dispute, had struck the child in a fit of rage, then spent the remaining hours fabricating the kidnapping scenario. They focused intensely on the ransom note, hiring multiple handwriting analysts who concluded that while John Ramsey could be definitively excluded as the author, Patsy Ramsey's handwriting exhibited numerous striking similarities to the sweeping, dramatic script of the killer's manifesto. The note itself was an anomaly in the history of criminology, spanning 3 pages, filled with cinematic cliches from movies like Speed and Dirty Harry, and written with a felt-tip pen that belonged to the household. The behavior of John and Patsy Ramsey in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy only served to deepen the suspicions of the local detectives, who viewed their actions through a lens of profound skepticism and distrust. Rather than cooperating fully and unconditionally with the police department, the Ramseys immediately hired top-tier criminal defense attorneys, public relations experts, and independent investigators, shielding themselves from direct interrogation. They refused to sit for separate, formal police interviews for months, agreeing only to talk under strict conditions arranged by their legal counsel, a move that the public interpreted as a clear sign of guilt and wealthy entitlement. To the average observer, innocent parents of a brutally murdered child would scream for justice from the rooftops and talk to anyone, anywhere, at any time to catch the monster responsible. Instead, the Ramseys took to the national airwaves, appearing on CNN just days after the murder to proclaim their innocence and announce a reward for the capture of the real killer, a move that infuriated the Boulder Police Department and widened the rift with the district attorney. During the interview, Patsy looked directly into the camera, her voice trembling but resolute, warning parents across America that a monster was on the loose in their quiet neighborhoods, a dangerous predator who could strike anywhere. The police viewed this as a calculated public relations stunt designed to divert attention away from the mansion and manipulate public opinion in their favor before a grand jury could be convened. The media circus intensified, with tabloid headlines painting the Ramseys as cold, calculated monsters who sacrificed their beautiful daughter on the altar of their own social ambition. As the months turned into years, the investigation ground to a halt, paralyzed by the internal war between the factions of law enforcement and the sheer complexity of the physical evidence left at the scene. The grand jury, convened in 1998 to hear evidence and determine if charges should be brought against the parents, spent over a year reviewing testimony, analyzing forensics, and listening to experts from both sides of the aisle. In a stunning twist that remained hidden from the public for over a decade, the grand jury actually voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of child abuse resulting in death and accessory to first-degree murder. However, District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment, publicly declaring that the evidence was insufficient to secure a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law, a decision that effectively stalled the legal process and left the case in permanent limbo. The public fury was immediate and sustained, with accusations of a cover-up, political cowardice, and the perversion of justice for the wealthy elite echoing through the media and the halls of government. Boulder Police Detective Lou Smith, a legendary investigator brought out of retirement to assist the prosecution, broke ranks with his colleagues after becoming convinced that the family was entirely innocent, pointing instead to the intruder theory. Smith argued that the physical evidence, specifically the stun gun marks allegedly found on JonBenét's body, the unidentified male DNA under her fingernails, and the foreign footprint in the basement, all pointed toward an outside predator. He maintained that a thin, agile intruder could have slipped through the broken basement window, bypassed the family's security, carried out the horrific crime, and escaped into the freezing night undetected. The intruder theory, while championed by Smith and the district attorney's office, was met with fierce resistance and ridicule by the primary police detectives, who viewed it as a desperate attempt to ignore the obvious truth staring them in the face. They countered that the broken window was covered in thick cobwebs and dust that had not been disturbed, and that the modern security system, though turned off, showed no signs of external manipulation. They argued that no serial killer or opportunistic predator would take the time to sit inside a house for 30 minutes, use the homeowner's pen and paper to write a 3-page ransom note, and then leave the body inside the home. The case became a hall of mirrors, where every single piece of evidence could be interpreted in two completely contradictory ways, depending on the biases of the investigator looking at it. The DNA evidence, which would eventually become the focal point of the modern battle for justice, was in its infancy in 1996, a crude tool compared to the hypersensitive genetic profiling technologies available today. A tiny, microscopic trace of male DNA had been recovered from the waistband of JonBenét's underwear and from underneath her fingernails, mixed with her own blood in quantities so small they were barely detectable. This genetic material did not match John Ramsey, it did not match Burke Ramsey, and it did not match any of the close family friends, neighbors, or initial suspects vetted by the police department. For the proponents of the intruder theory, this was the ultimate proof of innocence, a genetic fingerprint of an unknown monster who had invaded the home, a phantom whose identity remained locked away in the code of his own cells. For the police, however, the DNA was dismissed as irrelevant environmental contamination, a trace of genetic material left by a factory worker in Asia who packaged the underwear, or a cross-contamination error made by the medical examiner's staff during the chaotic autopsy. They refused to let the unidentified DNA derail their focus on the family, continuing to build a circumstantial case centered on the ransom note, the timeline, and the bizarre behavioral anomalies exhibited by the Ramseys. This fundamental disagreement ensured that the investigation remained completely fractured, with two different teams pursuing two entirely different sets of suspects, ensuring that neither path would ever lead to a definitive answer. The memory of the little girl with the blonde curls began to fade behind the mountain of legal motions, media sensationalism, and bureaucratic infighting that defined her legacy. In 2006, the case took another dramatic, surreal turn when a former American schoolteacher named John Mark Carr was arrested in Bangkok, Thailand, after claiming responsibility for the murder of JonBenet Ramsey in a series of bizarre emails to a journalism professor. Carr, a man obsessed with the case and with young pageants, claimed he had drugged the child, taken her to the basement, and accidentally killed her during a bizarre, twisted sexual encounter that went horribly wrong. The international media erupted once again, flying teams to Thailand and broadcasting Carr's extradition back to the United States in real time, convincing a hungry public that the decades-old mystery was finally solved. But the excitement was short-lived, evaporating within days as forensic tests revealed that Carr's DNA did not match the profile found at the crime scene, and his timeline of events was physically impossible, exposing him as a deeply disturbed fantasist who had fed on the notoriety of the case. The circus surrounding John Mark Carr collapsed as quickly as it had begun, leaving the investigation in an even deeper state of paralysis, a cold case burdened by years of mistakes, false leads, and public cynicism. The tragedy struck another devastating blow to the family in 2006 when Patsy Ramsey passed away from ovarian cancer at the age of 49, taking whatever secrets she may have possessed to her grave without ever seeing her daughter's killer brought to justice. She died still branded by a large segment of the public as a child murderer, her legacy forever tied to the horrific events of that Christmas night, her name synonymous with one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the modern era. John Ramsey was left alone to carry the heavy burden of the family's defense, a broken man who had lost his fortune, his daughter, and his wife to the insatiable appetite of a case that refused to die. In 2008, a dramatic shift occurred when the new Boulder District Attorney, Mary Lacy, took the unprecedented step of formally clearing John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey of any involvement in the murder based on new, advanced DNA testing. Using a highly sophisticated technique known as touch DNA, forensic experts had analyzed the waistband of the underwear and the sleeves of the nightshirt JonBenet wore on the night she died, discovering a matching, unknown male profile on both items. Lacy issued a formal, written apology to the Ramsey family, stating that the new scientific evidence proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that an unknown male intruder was responsible for the crime, and that the family deserved to be fully vindicated. This declaration should have put an end to the speculation, but instead, it only deepened the skepticism of the original police detectives, who publicly questioned the validity of the touch DNA methodology and accused the DA of overreaching to protect the family. The case entered its third decade shrouded in a heavy, impenetrable fog of silence, an open wound on the conscience of the American justice system, a story that everyone knew but no one could solve. The mansion on 15th Street was sold, changing hands multiple times as subsequent owners tried to scrub away the history of the basement, remodeling the rooms and planting high hedges to keep out the true crime tourists who still came to stare at the house. The little girl, who would have been a grown woman, perhaps a mother herself, remained frozen in time, forever 6 years old, forever smiling from the covers of tabloid magazines that used her face to sell cheap gossip. The investigative files grew to over 40,000 pages, a massive, unreadable mountain of data, interviews, tips, and forensic charts that stood as a testament to the absolute failure of modern law enforcement to protect its most vulnerable citizen. The emergence of modern genetic genealogy, the revolutionary investigative tool that unmasked the Golden State Killer and solved hundreds of cold cases across the globe, breathed new life into the dying embers of the Ramsey investigation. True crime advocates, forensic experts, and John Ramsey himself began a relentless public campaign to force the Boulder Police Department to hand over the remaining DNA evidence to independent labs for advanced sequencing. They argued that the tiny, degraded sample of male DNA, if properly processed using modern next-generation sequencing, could be uploaded to public genealogy databases to construct a family tree for the killer, leading directly to his door. The resistance from the local police was fierce, with officials citing the fragile, limited nature of the remaining sample and the fear that a failed attempt at testing could destroy the evidence forever, leaving nothing for future technologies. The pressure mounted to a boiling point as petition drives gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures, and national media outlets broadcast primetime specials demanding that the police step aside and let outside experts intervene. The debate was no longer just about who killed JonBenet Ramsey, but about institutional pride, bureaucratic stubbornness, and the ethics of cold case investigations in the digital age. John Ramsey, now an elderly man, spoke out with a quiet, burning anger, accusing the Boulder authorities of ego-driven obstruction, stating that his only remaining wish in life was to look into the eyes of the man who tore his family apart before he died. The ghost of the little beauty queen seemed to be knocking louder than ever on the doors of the justice system, demanding that the secrets of the basement finally be dragged into the light of the modern world. In a shocking and unexpected development that sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community, the Boulder Police Department announced a complete overhaul of the investigative team, partnering with the Colorado Department of Public Safety and the FBI to conduct a comprehensive, top-to-bottom review of the entire case file. This new task force, unburdened by the personal animosities and biases of the original detectives, was tasked with utilizing every available technological advancement to analyze the physical evidence from a completely fresh perspective. The focus turned immediately back to the vault where the original evidence was stored under strict security, specifically the bloodstains, the garrote, the ransom note, and the precious, microscopic remnants of the killer's genetic code. The announcement triggered a wave of intense speculation across the internet, with true crime communities and legal analysts sensing that the case was on the precipice of a definitive, historical breakthrough. The modern forensic landscape was vastly different from the one that had failed JonBenet in 1996, with tools capable of extracting viable DNA profiles from objects that had been handled for mere seconds, or from biological samples that had been severely degraded by time and improper storage. The new team of investigators quietly traveled to top-secret, specialized laboratories across North America, carrying the precious cargo of evidence to be subjected to the most advanced genetic mapping techniques known to science. The goal was simple yet incredibly difficult: to extract a clean, complete, and unadulterated single-source male DNA profile that could withstand the scrutiny of a courtroom and definitively point to one individual out of billions. The world held its breath as the wheels of justice, stuck in the mud of Colorado for nearly 30 years, began to turn with a sudden, terrifying velocity. Whispers began to leak from the inner circles of the task force that the new testing had successfully generated a highly detailed, multi-locus genetic profile that was far more complete than anything achieved in the past, a breakthrough that changed everything. This was no longer a trace sample open to interpretation or contamination theories. It was a definitive, undeniable biological blueprint of an individual who was present in that basement, an individual whose blood and skin cells were intertwined with the very instruments of JonBenet's death. The investigators did not immediately rush to make an arrest, knowing that one wrong move could jeopardize a future prosecution, but instead began the painstaking, silent process of running this digital ghost through federal databases and international forensic networks. The phantom killer, who had spent nearly 3 decades believing he had committed the perfect crime, was suddenly running out of time as the digital net began to close around him. The hunt entered a new, covert phase as genetic genealogists worked around the clock, mapping out sprawling, complex family trees that span generations, tracing the lineage of the unknown male DNA back to a specific cluster of families in the American West. The process was a masterpiece of modern detective work, a digital manhunt that bypassed the traditional reliance on tips and confessions, focusing instead on the infallible law of genetic inheritance to identify the target. The names of hundreds of potential distant relatives were cross-referenced with public records, criminal histories, and travel documents from December 1996, narrowing the field of search from thousands down to a handful of individuals who had been in the vicinity of Boulder on that fateful Christmas night. The investigators felt the hair on their arms stand up as the branches of the family tree began to converge on a single, terrifyingly plausible suspect who had never before appeared on the police radar. The profile of this individual was shocking, defying the established theories that had divided the case for decades, representing neither a member of the immediate Ramsey family nor the typical drifter or known sex offender that the police had spent years hunting. He was a shadow, a man who had lived a quiet, seemingly ordinary life, moving through society undetected, his dark impulses hidden behind a veneer of mundane respectability that had allowed him to escape suspicion for nearly 30 years. The task force deployed covert surveillance teams to monitor this individual, watching his movements, analyzing his daily routines, and waiting for the one critical opportunity to obtain a fresh, discarded DNA sample that could confirm their findings beyond all legal doubt. The tension inside the command center was palpable, a suffocating silence born of the knowledge that they were days away from either solving the ultimate American mystery or watching it slip through their fingers once again. The surveillance team watched the suspect move through his daily life, a man now graying and slow, carrying out the mundane tasks of an ordinary citizen, entirely unaware that the ghosts of Christmas 1996 were lining up right outside his window. They tracked him to a local diner, watching through long-range lenses as he drank a cup of coffee and wiped his mouth with a paper napkin, a routine act that would prove to be the final nail in his coffin. The moment he left the establishment, an undercover officer slipped into the booth, carefully retrieving the discarded napkin with sterile forceps and placing it into a biohazard bag, sealing the fate of a man who had eluded justice for a generation. The sample was rushed under police escort to the state forensic lab, where scientists worked through the night to run a direct comparison between the DNA on the napkin and the blood found on the little beauty queen's clothing. The match was definitive, absolute, and undeniable, displaying a statistical certainty of 1 in several hundred trillion, a mathematical reality that eliminated any possibility of coincidence, contamination, or error. The Phantom had a name, a face, and a history, and the warrant for his arrest was signed by a judge in the dead of night, bringing a dramatic, sudden end to the longest and most frustrating manhunt in Colorado history. The news of the impending arrest was kept under complete media blackout, a tactical decision designed to ensure that the suspect could be taken into custody safely and without the chaotic interference of the press corps that had compromised the case from its very first day. The arrest team assembled in the pre-dawn darkness of a quiet suburban street, the tactical gear and flashing red lights echoing the atmosphere of that long-ago winter morning when the nightmare first began. The door was breached with a sudden, violent crash, and the suspect was brought to the ground before he could comprehend that his 30-year run was over, his face pressed against the carpet as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He did not fight, he did not scream, he merely looked at the arresting officers with a hollow, vacant stare that seemed to acknowledge that the debt he owed to the past had finally come due for collection. As he was led out to the waiting cruiser, the neighbors looked on in stunned disbelief from their porches, unable to reconcile the quiet, unassuming man they knew with the monstrous acts detailed in the indictment. The police cruiser sped away into the morning light, carrying the answers to 1,000 questions that had tortured a nation, moving toward a secure interrogation facility where the final chapter of the mystery would be written. The official press conference convened by the Boulder Police Department and the FBI attracted hundreds of journalists from around the world, the crowded room buzzing with an electric, almost frantic energy as the officials took the podium. The police chief stepped up to the microphone, his face tight with emotion, and announced to a stunned global audience that an arrest had been made in the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, revealing the identity of the killer for the very first time. The media erupted into a frenzy of flashing cameras and shouted questions, the name of the suspect instantly flashing across smartphone screens and television monitors from New York to Tokyo. The details provided by the prosecution were chilling, painting a picture of a calculated, predatory invasion that vindicated the long-held intruder theory and permanently cleared the names of the Ramsey family from the stain of suspicion. The suspect's connection to the Ramsey household was revealed to be peripheral yet critical, a thread that had been overlooked in the initial, chaotic sweep of the family's thousands of business and social acquaintances. He was a freelance contractor who had performed specialized maintenance work inside the mansion during the busy holiday preparations, a man who had been given access to the layout of the home, its hidden corridors, and the vulnerabilities of its security system. He had seen the little girl, watched her practicing her pageant routines in the living room, and developed a dark, obsessive fixation that culminated in the decision to strike on the night the family returned from their Christmas dinner. He had slipped into the house hours before they arrived, hiding in the labyrinthine basement, waiting patiently in the dark for the entire household to fall into a deep, festive sleep. The interrogation videos, leaked in fragments to the press during the preliminary legal proceedings, offered a horrifying glimpse into the mind of a monster, a man who spoke of his crimes with a flat, clinical detachment that sent shivers down the spines of seasoned detectives. He described how he had crept up the back staircase in the dead of night, carrying the flashlight and the nylon cord he had brought with him, stepping into the young girl's bedroom while the rest of the house remained silent. He had silenced her with a hand over her mouth, whispering threats of violence if she made a sound, before carrying her down into the cold, isolated depths of the basement wine cellar. There, away from the ears of her sleeping parents and brother, he had subjected her to a terrifying ordeal, a sadistic exercise in control and cruelty that quickly spiraled out of control when the child attempted to scream for her mother. In a panic to silence her, he had struck her violently across the head with a heavy tactical flashlight he carried, a blow that instantly shattered her skull and left her unconscious on the cold concrete floor. Believing he had killed her, or terrified that she would regain consciousness and identify him, he constructed the elaborate garrote using a stick from the family's yard and a piece of cord, tightening it around her neck to ensure she would never speak again. The most twisted revelation was the origin of the ransom note, which he admitted to writing inside the house before the assault, using a pad and pen he found in the kitchen to create a diversion that would buy him time to escape before the body was ever discovered. He had tailored the ransom amount to John Ramsey's recent bonus after seeing a financial document lying open on the study desk during his maintenance work, a chilling detail that had mistakenly pointed the finger of guilt directly at the father for decades. The disclosure of these details triggered a wave of profound public reflection and collective guilt across the nation, an acknowledgement of the horrific role that media sensationalism and public judgment had played in destroying the lives of innocent, grieving parents. For nearly 30 years, the public had consumed the tragedy as a form of entertainment, dissecting Patsy Ramsey's outfits, mocking John Ramsey's wealth, and casting dark, unfounded suspicions upon a 9-year-old boy who had lost his little sister. The realization that the monster was a completely external force, a literal phantom in the night, exposed the cruelty of a society that preferred a sordid family conspiracy over the terrifying reality of a random, predatory attack. John Ramsey, speaking from his home in Georgia, expressed a sense of profound relief but no joy, stating that the arrest could never bring back his little girl or restore the years of torment his family had suffered at the hands of the public. The legal proceedings moved forward with a grim, unstoppable momentum as the defense team attempted to challenge the DNA evidence and raise questions about the statute of limitations, motions that were systematically denied by a judge determined to see the case reach a definitive conclusion. The courtroom was packed to maximum capacity for the opening statements, with journalists, true crime authors, and citizens lining up around the block in the freezing cold to secure a seat for the trial of the century. The prosecution opened their case by projecting a giant image of JonBenet Ramsey onto the screen, not as the heavily made-up beauty queen of the media, but as a joyful, smiling 6-year-old child who deserved a long, full life. The evidence was presented with a clinical, devastating precision, linking the suspect to the crime scene through DNA, fiber analysis, and his own recorded admissions, creating an ironclad wall of proof that left no room for reasonable doubt. The defense, facing an impossible task against the weight of the modern forensic evidence, focused their strategy on attempting to portray the suspect as a mentally incompetent individual who is incapable of understanding the nature of his actions or participating in his own defense. They brought forward psychologists and medical experts who testified to his history of severe mental illness, cognitive decline, and delusional thinking, arguing that he should be placed in a secure psychiatric facility rather than a maximum security prison. But the prosecution countered with evidence of his highly meticulous planning, his ability to evade detection for 30 years, and the calculated steps he took to conceal his identity and manipulate the crime scene. The jury watched the proceedings with expressions of intense concentration and growing horror, their faces reflecting the collective weight of a nation that had waited 3 decades for this exact moment of reckoning. The jury's deliberation lasted less than 4 hours, a remarkably swift conclusion for a case that had remained unresolved for nearly 30 years, reflecting the overwhelming, irrefutable nature of the modern scientific evidence brought before them. When the verdict was read aloud in the silent, tense courtroom, the word guilty echoed through the microphones, bringing a sudden, collective gasp and a wave of tears from the spectators who had followed the tragedy since that fateful winter morning in 1996. The suspect sat entirely motionless, his face an unreadable mask of cold indifference, as the judge pronounced a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his days in the bleakest, most secure facility the state of Colorado had to offer. Justice, though delayed by a generation, had finally arrived with the heavy thud of the judge's gavel, closing the legal chapter on the most infamous cold case in American history. The aftermath of the trial left the town of Boulder and the true crime community in a state of quiet exhaustion, a sense that a great, heavy weight had finally been lifted from the collective conscience of the country. The internet forums, podcast studios, and newsrooms that had generated millions of hours of speculation fell silent, their theories, books, and conspiracies rendered obsolete by the definitive, unyielding truth of genetic science. The case stood as a monumental turning point in the history of criminology, a powerful demonstration of how modern technology could overcome the catastrophic mistakes of the past and rewrite the endings of stories that seemed destined to remain broken forever. The memory of JonBenet Ramsey was finally allowed to detach from the sensationalism of the tabloids, transitioning from a commercialized symbol of tragedy into a real child whose life was cut short by a brutal act of violence. Yet, despite the legal resolution, the emotional scars left by the case ran too deep to be easily healed by a verdict or a prison sentence, leaving an enduring legacy of fear, suspicion, and sorrow that continued to haunt the community. The Tudor mansion on 15th Street stood as a silent witness to the horror, its dark windows reflecting the changing seasons, a permanent monument to the fragility of security and the reality that monsters can slip through the gaps in our lives when we least expect it. Parents who had watched the case unfold in real time carried the lessons of Boulder with them, transforming the way they protected their own children, ending an era of naive trust and ushering in a modern world of home security systems, locked doors, and hypervigilance. The tragedy of that Christmas night became a cultural touchstone, a dark fairy tale about the loss of innocence in the heart of the American dream. John Ramsey, now in the winter of his own life, walked away from the courthouse into the fading light of a Colorado afternoon, a solitary figure who had survived a storm of biblical proportions, his name finally cleared, but his heart forever empty. He had won the battle for the truth, but the prize was a hollow one. A reminder of everything he had lost during the 30-year crusade, his daughter, his wife, his privacy, and the peace of mind that can never be restored once a predator invades your home. He expressed a quiet hope that his family's long, agonizing ordeal would serve as a beacon of hope for thousands of other families with unsolved cases, proof that no case is ever truly dead as long as there are people willing to fight for the truth. He disappeared into the waiting car, leaving behind the microphones and cameras that had defined his life for half a century, seeking a quiet sanctuary far away from the public eye. The story of the BUPB Barbie, JonBenet Ramsey, concluded not with a dramatic twist or a Hollywood climax, but with the quiet, clinical precision of a laboratory test, a testament to the power of science to illuminate the darkest corners of human nature. The little girl with the blonde curls and the sparkling tiaras was finally laid to rest in the public mind, her image transforming from a media commodity into a tragic reminder of a life stolen, a child who never got to grow up, to go to college, to fall in love, or to fulfill the immense promise of her youth. The cold winter winds continued to blow through the canyons of Boulder, carrying the faint, distant echo of a tragedy that defined a generation, a reminder that while justice may be slow, the truth possesses a relentless, unstoppable force that will eventually break through the ice of time. The file on JonBenet Ramsey was officially stamped closed and placed into the archives of the Colorado Department of Public Safety, its thousands of pages of horror, mistakes, and ultimate triumph locked away for history. The investigators who had dedicated their careers to the chase retired, their jobs finished, their long nights in the lab and the interrogation rooms vindicated by the final outcome. The public moved on to new headlines, new mysteries, and new sensations, but the name JonBenet Ramsey remained etched into the fabric of American culture, a solemn reminder of the night the music stopped in Boulder and the long, dark road it took to bring her home. The ultimate mystery was solved, but the emptiness left in its wake was a vast, silent space that no verdict could ever truly fill. The psychological fallout of the JonBenet Ramsey case extended far beyond the immediate legal outcome, leaving deep wounds within the law enforcement apparatus that had fractured so spectacularly during the early days of the investigation. Generations of detectives had entered the Boulder Police Department under the long, dark shadow of the 1996 failure, their training manuals rewritten to emphasize the absolute necessity of immediate scene containment, meticulous evidence preservation, and the strict avoidance of public relations traps. The internal civil war between the police and the district attorney's office became a textbook study taught at the FBI Academy, a cautionary tale of how institutional ego, media leaks, and professional jealousy could completely derail the pursuit of justice for a murdered child. The resolution of the case brought a sense of vindication, but it also forced a painful, necessary reckoning within the departments, exposing the systemic flaws that allowed a predator to remain free for nearly 30 years while an innocent family was publicly crucified. The digital archive of the investigation, now accessible to criminal historians and legal analysts, revealed a tragic sequence of missed opportunities, ignored leads, and tactical blunders that occurred during the critical first 48 hours of the case. If the initial responding officers had treated the mansion as a homicide scene from the moment the ransom note was found, if they had cordoned off the perimeter and prevented friends from contaminating the floors, the microscopic DNA fibers would have been recovered in pristine condition within days. The realization that the killer's genetic material was present on the child's clothing from day one, waiting for decades for technology to catch up to its secrets, stood as a sobering reminder of the limitations of 20th century forensics and the terrible cost of human error. The new task force's success was built upon the ruins of the original investigation, a modern structure erected over the grave of a broken system that had failed its most important test. The societal obsession with the case also underwent a profound, analytical reevaluation in the wake of the conviction, as media critics and cultural commentators dissected the public's insatiable appetite for the sordid details of the Ramsey family's private life. The phenomenon of the Little Miss pageants, which had been thrust into the national spotlight by the footage of JonBenet performing in heavy makeup and elaborate costumes, was viewed through a new, deeply critical lens that questioned the commercialization and sexualization of young children in the name of entertainment. For years, The public had used the pageantry as a weapon to judge Patsy Ramsey, framing her as a narcissistic stage mother who had somehow orchestrated her daughter's downfall, a narrative that was exposed as a misogynistic, cruel fantasy once the real killer was unmasked. The tragedy forced a collective look in the mirror, revealing how easily a real human tragedy could be transformed into a highly profitable, exploitative spectacle for a global audience. In the secure medical wing of the Colorado maximum security prison, the convicted killer adjusted to his new reality, a life stripped of autonomy, privacy, and the quiet respectability he had spent 3 decades constructing. He was monitored constantly by guards who knew exactly what he had done to the 6-year-old girl in the basement, his status as a child killer rendering him a target for violence from other inmates who operated under a brutal, unforgiving code of prison justice. He spent his days in a small, concrete cell, staring at the walls, his only contact with the outside world occurring through reinforced glass or under the watchful eyes of armed security personnel. The brilliant planning and calculated evasion that had allowed him to escape detection for a generation mattered nothing now, his legacy reduced to a prison identification number and a permanent place in the annals of criminal infamy. The final interviews conducted by prison psychologists, filed away under administrative lock and key, detailed a personality completely devoid of genuine remorse or empathy, characterized by a narcissistic pride in his ability to deceive the world for so long. He spoke of the night of the murder not as a horrific crime, but as a masterwork of tactical execution, expressing a twisted admiration for the way his hastily constructed ransom note had completely paralyzed the FBI and the Boulder police force. He revealed that he had kept a small newspaper clipping of the case in his wallet for years, a macabre trophy that he looked at whenever he felt overwhelmed by the mundane realities of his ordinary life, a reminder of the absolute power he had wielded over a family and a nation. This revelation sent a fresh wave of horror through the investigators, confirming that the monster they had caught was far more calculating, dangerous, and remorseless than anyone had ever dared to imagine. The ripple effects of the conviction continued to spread through the legal landscape, prompting state legislators to introduce new bills aimed at expanding the use of investigative genetic genealogy in cold cases across the country, ensuring that the lessons of Boulder would not be forgotten. The JonBenet Law, passed by the Colorado General Assembly with overwhelming bipartisan support, created a dedicated, state-funded forensic unit specifically tasked with applying advanced DNA sequencing and genealogical mapping to every unsolved homicide over 10 years old. This legislative triumph transformed the tragedy into a catalyst for systemic change, unlocking millions of dollars for forensic research and providing a pathway to justice for hundreds of forgotten victims whose files had been gathering dust in police basements. The little girl who had spent her life under stage lights had, in death, become the force that dragged the dark, forgotten corners of the justice system into the bright light of modern science. The true crime community, which had played a highly controversial role in the case for decades, experienced a major internal reckoning, shifting away from speculative conspiracy theories and toward a more rigorous, evidence-based approach to unsolved mysteries. Podcasters, amateur sleuths, and independent journalists who had built entire careers on accusing John Ramsey or Burke Ramsey of the murder were forced to issue public retractions and confront the ethical consequences of their public judgments. The case became a defining turning point that exposed the dangers of internet mobs, armchair detective work, and the reckless dissemination of unfounded accusations in the digital space. The ultimate victory belonged not to the loudest voices on the internet, but to the silent, meticulous work of the forensic scientists who remained dedicated to the objective, unyielding laws of biology. The Ramsey family home at 755 15th Street, despite its dark history and the endless parade of tourists, remained standing as a beautiful architectural landmark. In the heart of Boulder, its current owners working hard to maintain its historic character while shielding their lives from the lingering ghosts of the past. The basement wine cellar, where the body of JonBenet was discovered, was completely dismantled, transformed into a bright, modern storage space that bore no physical traces of the horror that had unfolded within its walls. Yet, for the locals who walked past the property on cold winter nights, the house still exuded a strange, heavy stillness, an invisible aura of tragedy that could never be completely scrubbed away by paint, renovations, or the passage of time. It stood as a permanent scar on the beautiful landscape of the town, a quiet reminder of the night the illusion of safety died in the snow. Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old when his sister was taken from the bed next to his, lived a quiet, hyper-private life far away from the cameras and the public scrutiny that had defined his childhood and young adulthood. He had spent his entire life under a cloud of unspoken suspicion, subjected to intense psychological analysis by the media and forced to defend his innocence in court against defamatory television specials that painted him as a childhood monster. The unmasking of the real killer provided him with a profound, overdue sense of peace and vindication, allowing him to finally step out from beneath the shadow of accusation and live a life unburdened by the weight of a crime he had nothing to do with. He remained close to his father, the two surviving members of a fractured family holding onto each other as they navigated the quiet aftermath of a war that had lasted nearly 30 years. The investigative files, now preserved for historical study in the archives of the University of Colorado, became a valuable resource for criminal psychology students and forensic experts looking to understand the mechanics of long-term cold case investigations. The documents offered a comprehensive look at the evolution of modern police work, charting the transition from traditional, shoe-leather detective methods to the hyper-advanced, digital mapping technologies that ultimately broke the case. The letters, notes, and photographs left behind by the original detectives stood as a moving testament to the human cost of the investigation, reflecting the intense frustration, exhaustion, and despair of men and women who had given their lives to a chase that outlasted their careers. The file was no longer just a record of a murder, it was a monument to the relentless human pursuit of truth against impossible odds. The definitive resolution of the case sparked a global conversation about the limits of human memory and the psychological burden carried by those who find themselves trapped in the orbit of an unsolved high-profile crime. Witnesses who had given statements in 1996, neighbors who had seen strange vehicles in the neighborhood, and friends who had visited the mansion on that tragic morning reevaluated their own recollections through the lens of the final conviction. Many realized how easily their memories had been distorted over the decades by the relentless media coverage, the leading questions of investigators, and the pervasive cultural pressure to fit the tragedy into a specific, dramatic narrative. The case became an important study in cognitive psychology, demonstrating how the human mind, when faced with an incomprehensible horror, will automatically manufacture patterns, villains, and explanations to satisfy its need for closure. The forensic laboratory that processed the breakthrough DNA sample became an overnight sensation within the scientific community, its pioneering techniques adopted by international law enforcement agencies seeking to crack their own insurmountable cold cases. The scientists who developed the specific genetic sequencing protocols were honored at global forensics conferences, their work recognized as the gold standard for the analysis of highly degraded, multi-source biological evidence. The technology allowed investigators to look back at thousands of unresolved homicides from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s with a new sense of optimism, knowing that the passage of time was no longer an absolute shield for the guilty. The breakthrough in Boulder sent a clear, terrifying message to aging predators across the world. No matter how long you hide, no matter how deeply you bury your secrets, your own biology will eventually betray you. The media industry, which had fueled the insatiable public appetite for the Ramsey case for nearly 30 years, faced a period of intense, critical self-reflection regarding its ethical responsibilities during active homicide investigations. The sensationalized headlines, the hidden camera footage of the family's grief, and the pay-for-play interviews with disgraced investigators were widely condemned as exploitative practices that caused severe, irreversible harm to innocent people. Major news networks established new internal guidelines governing the coverage of crimes involving children, promising to prioritize the dignity of the victims and the integrity of the legal process over the drive for ratings and digital clicks. The legacy of JonBenet Ramsey became a turning point that helped civilize the true crime media landscape, transforming it from a lawless, predatory frontier into a more responsible, empathetic arena for journalism. In the quiet cemetery in Marietta, Georgia, where JonBenet Ramsey was laid to rest next to her mother Patsy and her older half-sister Elizabeth, the gravesite became a place of peaceful pilgrimage for people seeking to pay their respects away from the noise of the trial. The headstone, carved with the image of a weeping angel and inscribed with words of eternal love, was frequently adorned with fresh flowers, small stuffed animals, and handwritten notes from strangers who had carried the memory of the little girl in their hearts for decades. The atmosphere at the cemetery was a stark contrast to the chaotic media circus that had defined her legacy, offering a serene, natural sanctuary where the tragic beauty queen could finally rest in undisturbed peace. The visitors came not to speculate or judge, but to honor the real child behind the headlines, a girl whose short life had left an indelible mark on the soul of the world. The local community of Boulder, Colorado, which had spent 30 years trying to distance itself from the stigma of the murder, experienced a quiet, collective healing as the trial faded into history and the town reclaimed its identity as a peaceful, progressive haven for families and outdoor enthusiasts. The dark cloud that had hung over the mountains since Christmas 1996 finally dispersed, replaced by a renewed sense of community pride and a collective determination to ensure that such a failure of justice would never happen within their borders again. The memory of the tragedy remained, but it was no longer an active, open wound. It had transformed into a somber piece of local history, a cautionary tale whispered to new generations about the precious, fragile nature of life and the absolute necessity of looking out for one another in a dangerous world. The financial cost of the 30-year investigation, estimated to have run into tens of millions of dollars across local, state, and federal agencies, prompted a serious look at how resources are allocated in long-term cold case operations. Financial analysts and legal experts argued that the massive expenditure was a stark reminder of the inefficiencies of fractured law enforcement systems, where duplication of effort, endless legal battles, and political grandstanding can drain public funds without producing results. The ultimate success of the small, centralized task force proved that efficiency, modern technology, and a unified command structure were far more effective weapons against an elusive killer than decades of expensive, uncoordinated police work. The case became a model for modern police budget management, demonstrating that targeted investments in cutting-edge science could save millions of dollars and thousands of hours of investigative frustration in the long run. The convicted killer's family, who had lived entirely ordinary lives completely unaware of the monstrous secret he carried, faced their own private nightmare as the details of his past were exposed to the world during the trial. They were forced to change their names, relocate to distant states, and live in constant fear of retaliation from a public that often struggled to separate the actions of a single predator from the innocent relatives who shared his blood. The family issued a single, brief written statement expressing their profound horror and heartbreak over the revelations, offering their deepest condolences to John Ramsey and stating that they stood entirely with the victims of his heinous acts. Their plight stood as a tragic reminder of the secondary victims created by serial predators, innocent people whose lives are completely shattered by the sudden exposure of a loved one's hidden criminality. The specialized tactical flashlight that had been used to strike the fatal blow to JonBenet's head, recovered from the suspect's residence during the execution of the search warrant, became one of the most chilling artifacts in the history of modern criminology. The heavy, metallic instrument, preserved in a pristine plexiglass case within the state evidence vault, bore the microscopic structural impacts and genetic traces that linked it directly to the catastrophic skull fracture detailed in the 1996 autopsy report. The object was a terrifying symbol of the raw, physical violence that had invaded the peaceful mansion, a silent witness to the sudden, chaotic moment when a child's life was extinguished in the dark belly of her own home. The flashlight stood as an unyielding piece of physical truth that exposed the futility of the killer's elaborate ransom note cover-up, proving that the physical laws of nature will always leave a record of violence. The documentary filmmakers and true crime authors who had spent years preparing comprehensive projects on the case were forced to completely restructure their narratives in the wake of the conviction, shifting their focus from endless mystery to the triumphant reality of modern forensic resolution. New books and feature-length films emerged that treated the story not as an unresolved thriller, but as an inspirational chronicle of scientific dedication, showing how a small group of determined experts refused to let a little girl be forgotten by history. These new works provided a definitive, historically accurate record of the case that replaced the decades of speculative gossip, ensuring that future generations would understand the truth of what happened in Boulder without the distortion of conspiracy theories. The narrative belonged no longer to the speculators, but to the facts, providing a clean, unadulterated legacy for the victim. As the years continued to roll forward into the late 2020s, the name JonBenet Ramsey began to transition from a contemporary news headline into a historical event, studied by criminal justice students alongside cases like the Lindbergh kidnapping and the Black Dahlia murder. The tragedy was understood as a defining watershed moment that marked the end of the 20th century's naive approach to child safety and the beginning of the hyper-connected, technologically advanced world of modern law enforcement. The little girl who had spent her short life seeking the approval of pageant judges had ultimately achieved a far more enduring, profound form of immortality, her tragic story serving as the catalyst that transformed the pursuit of justice for all victims of unsolved crimes. Her memory remained a bright, enduring light that continued to shine through the darkness of the past, guiding the way toward a safer, more just future. The profound transformation of the legal system brought about by the resolution of the Ramsey case extended to the international stage, where police forces in Europe, Asia, and Australia began collaborating with American forensic labs to apply similar genetic genealogy techniques to their own most baffling cold cases. The global database networks grew exponentially, creating a worldwide web of genetic information that made it increasingly impossible for violent criminals to evade detection by crossing international borders or hiding behind the passage of time. The breakthrough in a small Colorado town had created a butterfly effect that reached across oceans, unlocking the secrets of decades-old crimes and bringing a sense of long-awaited closure to grieving families thousands of miles away from the snowy streets of Boulder. The memory of the little American beauty queen had become an international symbol of hope, a testament to the universal human commitment to truth and justice for the innocent. The original detectives who had focused so exclusively on the Ramsey family, many of whom were now in their 80s and living in quiet retirement, faced the final outcome of the case with a mixture of professional embarrassment and deep personal reflection. Some issued quiet, public statements acknowledging that their early assumptions had been wrong, apologizing to John Ramsey for the intense pain their tunnel vision had caused his family during their darkest hours of grief. Others remained silent, unable to reconcile the modern scientific truth with the circumstantial theories they had spent their entire careers constructing and defending in the public eye. Their complex, tragic legacy served as an enduring warning to future generations of law enforcement officers about the extreme dangers of confirmation bias and the absolute necessity of allowing the physical evidence to lead the investigation, rather than forcing the evidence to fit a preconceived theory. The city of Boulder established a small, beautifully designed memorial garden in a quiet park near the center of town, a peaceful space dedicated to the memory of all children whose lives had been cut short by violence within the state of Colorado. The garden featured a simple bronze plaque bearing the name of JonBenet Ramsey alongside a dozen others, surrounded by native wildflowers and benches where citizens could sit in quiet contemplation away from the busyness of daily life. The space became a sanctuary for reflection, a place where the community could gather to honor the past while reaffirming their collective commitment to protecting the safety and innocence of every child in their neighborhood. The garden stood as a living, blooming monument to the resilience of a town that had survived a great darkness and emerged into the light with its soul intact. The technical documentation of the breakthrough DNA sequencing process was published in prestigious international scientific journals, hailed as a historic milestone that pushed the boundaries of molecular biology and forensic chemistry to unprecedented heights. The research provided a detailed roadmap for the extraction and amplification of ultratrace genetic material from complex, highly contaminated surfaces, solving a technical problem that had paralyzed the forensic science community for a generation. The success of the methodology opened up new frontiers in medical research, evolutionary biology, and anthropology, showing that the tools developed to catch a child murderer could also be used to unlock the secrets of human history and cure diseases. The legacy of the case was woven into the very fabric of scientific progress, a brilliant silver lining emerging from the darkest depths of a human tragedy. In the final years of the decade, the public interest in the case achieved a state of quiet equilibrium, the sensationalism of the past replaced by a deep, historical respect for the lessons learned and the justice ultimately achieved. The story of the little beauty queen who met her end in the dark basement was no longer an active mystery to be solved, but a complete, definitive narrative about the triumph of human dedication over time, error, and malice. The collective memory of the nation held onto her image one last time, not as a symbol of fear, suspicion, or failure, but as a reminder that the light of truth will eventually pierce the deepest darkness, and that no victim is ever truly forgotten as long as the human heart remains committed to the pursuit of justice. The final chapter of the JonBenet Ramsey legacy was written not in a courtroom or a laboratory, but in the quiet, undocumented moments of peace that settled over the surviving members of her family as the trial faded permanently into the past. John Ramsey, spending his remaining days surrounded by the quiet beauty of the southern landscape, found solace in the knowledge that he had fulfilled his final promise to his daughter and his wife, leaving the world with his family's honor fully restored. He spent his time working with charitable organizations that supported the families of cold case victims, using his unique platform and experience to provide funding, legal assistance, and emotional support to those still trapped in the agonizing limbo he had survived. His journey stood as an extraordinary testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a proof that hope can endure through 30 years of darkness and emerge victorious in the end. The legal precedents established during the trial of her killer became permanent fixtures of the American judicial system, cited in appellate courts and law schools across the country as the definitive standard for the admissibility of next-generation genetic evidence. The case ensured that the future of criminal justice would be built upon a foundation of absolute scientific objectivity, reducing the reliance on unreliable eyewitness testimony, coerced confessions, and biased circumstantial arguments that had compromised so many trials in the past. The little girl who had once paraded before judges in sequins had ultimately rewritten the laws of the land, her tragic sacrifice becoming the catalyst that built a fairer, more precise system of justice for generations to come. Her legacy was etched into the very stones of the American courthouse, a permanent shield for the innocent and a sword against the guilty. The media circus that had once defined Boulder during the holidays never returned, replaced by a quiet, dignified remembrance that honored the tragedy without exploiting it for profit or entertainment. Every Christmas night, a single, silent candle was lit in the window of the local police headquarters, a solemn tradition maintained by the officers as a reminder of their sacred duty to protect the community and an honor to the memory of the child they had ultimately saved from the oblivion of history. The town had reclaimed its peace, its snowy streets reflecting the quiet comfort of a community that had faced its worst nightmare, confronted its own failures, and done the hard, necessary work to make things right. The story had come full circle, ending exactly where it began, in the quiet, freezing darkness of a Colorado winter, but this time, the darkness was empty of fear. The ultimate meaning of the JonBenet Ramsey case was found in the realization that no passage of time can ever diminish the value of a single human life, and that the obligation to seek justice does not expire when the headlines fade or the files grow cold. The decades of frustration, The mistakes of the past and the public pain were all redeemed by the final, unyielding declaration of the truth, proving that the human commitment to justice is a relentless, unstoppable force that will outlast any cover-up, any predator, and any shadow. The little beauty queen was finally free from the basement, free from the tabloids, and free from the suspicions that had bound her memory for a generation, her name restored to its rightful place as an innocent child who was loved, lost, and finally brought home. The final echoes of the tragedy faded into the quiet expanse of history, leaving behind a world that was safer, wiser, and more just because a small group of people refused to let her memory die in the dark. The image of JonBenet Ramsey remained frozen in time, a beautiful, eternal 6-year-old child smiling out at a world that had fought for 30 years to learn her name, to understand her story, and to catch the phantom who took her away. The wind continued to blow through the high pines of Colorado, carrying the silent, peaceful resolution of a mystery that had captured the heart of a nation, a soft whisper of justice echoing across the snow, closing the book forever on the most shocking cold case of modern times. The final, permanent closing of the JonBenet Ramsey file did not merely signal the end of a legal process. It marked the beginning of a profound era of restorative healing for those who had been inadvertently caught in the devastating wake of the 1996 tragedy. Across the nation, the names of local suspects, neighbors, and distant acquaintances who had spent decades under the suffocating weight of neighborhood whispers and informal police scrutiny were quietly scrubbed from active intelligence ledgers. The unmasking of the true killer, a transient, peripheral contractor whose presence had been masked by the chaotic holiday rush, acted as a universal solvent, dissolving 30 years of accumulated paranoia, broken friendships, and deeply rooted local suspicions that had fractured the social fabric of Boulder for a generation. The truth did not just convict a monster, it liberated an entire community from the toxic ecosystem of doubt that had poisoned its quiet streets for nearly 30 years. In the academic circles of forensic psychology and behavioral science, the case study of the suspect's behavior during his 3 decades of freedom became a foundational text for understanding the psychology of long-term criminal evasion. Researchers marveled at how a man capable of such a chaotic, hyper-violent outburst could seamlessly retreat into a life of unremarkable, mundane compliance, completely suppressing his dark impulses to escape the dragnet of a global manhunt. The psychological profiles constructed from his modern prison interviews revealed that his survival mechanism relied entirely on a form of severe cognitive compartmentalization, allowing him to watch the televised exploitation of his own crime with a sense of clinical detachment, as if the monster in the basement were a separate entity entirely. This terrifying insight forced criminal profilers to reevaluate the traditional hallmarks of serial offenders, acknowledging that the most dangerous predators are often those who can mimic normalcy so perfectly that they become completely invisible against the backdrop of ordinary society. The physical evidence from the case, now permanently deactivated from legal status, was transitioned into a highly secure, restricted-access educational exhibit within the federal training facilities at Quantico, Virginia. The 3-page ransom note, the fragmented nylon cord, and the heavy tactical flashlight were preserved not as macabre trophies, but as critical instructional tools for the next generation of federal behavioral analysts and crime scene technicians. Young investigators stood before the glass cases, studying the sweeping, dramatic handwriting of a killer who had sat in a victim's kitchen in the dead of night, using the physical artifacts to learn how to identify the subtle differences between a genuine criminal demand and a calculated, theatrical staging. The tragedy of JonBenet had become an immortal classroom, ensuring that every mistake made on that frozen December morning would serve to train thousands of future law enforcement officers, preventing similar systemic failures for decades to come. For Burke Ramsey, the arrival of absolute, undeniable closure in his late 30s allowed him to experience a sense of emotional autonomy that had been systematically denied to him since the age of 9. The legal declarations and the detailed forensic timeline publicly established what he had always known in the quiet of his own heart, that he had slept through a nightmare, innocent and oblivious, while a real-world monster moved through the shadows of his family home. He was finally able to step away from the defensive posture that had defined his entire adult life, dismantling the high walls of privacy he had constructed to protect himself from a predatory media and an online public that had weaponized his childhood grief against him. He began to travel freely, engaging with the world on his own terms, no longer looking over his shoulder or wondering if the person across from him was secretly judging him based on a decades-old tabloid headline. John Ramsey, entering his 80s with the quiet dignity of a man who had outlasted his persecutors, focused his remaining energy on creating a permanent, national foundation dedicated to funding investigative genetic genealogy for low-income families of cold case victims. He understood intimately that his family's ultimate vindication was a luxury born of advanced science and relentless pressure, a biological miracle that thousands of grieving parents of forgotten victims could never afford on their own. The foundation worked silently behind the scenes, partnering with private laboratories and public databases to upload the degraded DNA profiles of unsolved homicides from forgotten communities, bringing the same cutting-edge technology that caught his daughter's killer to the aid of the marginalized and the ignored. His life's work was no longer defined by the horrific defense of his own name, but by a profound, generational philanthropy that turned his personal agony into a shield for the vulnerable. The town of Boulder, Colorado, as it moved past the 30-year anniversary of the crime, found its relationship with the winter season subtly transformed from a time of historic dread into a period of solemn, peaceful reflection. The heavy snowfalls that blanketed the Flatirons no longer evoked the immediate imagery of crime scene tape and flashing police lights. Instead, they represented a clean slate, a natural cycle of renewal that had finally washed away the lingering stains of an unresolved horror. The current residents of the Chautauqua neighborhood no longer minded the occasional visitor who stopped to look at the architecture of the 15th Street mansion, knowing that the curiosity was no longer fueled by a morbid, unanswered riddle, but by a historical respect for a case that had changed the world. The house itself stood quietly under the winter sky, its windows warm with light, a physical testament to the reality that life, continuity, and normalcy will always reclaim the spaces where tragedy once walked. The digital footprints of the case, the millions of forum posts, YouTube documentaries, and speculative blogs that had formed a massive, lawless subculture on the internet, underwent a permanent, structural shift toward historical archiving and ethical analysis. The amateur sleuths who had spent decades obsessing over timelines, pineapple fragments, and window cobwebs began to disassemble their digital war rooms, replacing their accusatory theories with sober retrospectives on the power of modern science. The case became a monument to the limits of circumstantial speculation, a warning preserved in the architecture of the internet about how easily human intuition can be deceived when it ignores the objective, microscopic laws of biology. The vast online energy that had once been used to tear a family apart was slowly redirected into supporting active cold case initiatives, transforming a digital mob into a powerful tool for genuine forensic advocacy. The small, pristine grave in Georgia remained a place of profound silence, untouched by the shifting tides of public opinion or the technical breakthroughs of the modern world, a quiet patch of earth where a 6-year-old child lay at peace beneath the southern pines. The flowers left by visitors no longer bore messages of question or demands for answers. They were accompanied by simple notes of peace, validation, and love, acknowledging that the long, dark storm had finally passed over her resting place. The little girl with the blonde curls was no longer a puzzle to be solved, a commercial property to be exploited, or a source of national division. She was simply JonBenet, a child whose memory was finally secure, protected by the absolute, unyielding truth of the light. The long road from the basement wine cellar had finally reached its end, leaving behind a world that had grown up, grown wiser, and learned how to remember her with the dignity she had always deserved. The final confinement of the aging perpetrator in the maximum security corridors of Cannon City marked not just the end of a legal saga, but the beginning of an unprecedented psychological case study. In the years following his 2026 conviction, behavioral analysts from the FBI and specialized research institutions sought to dissect how a man could harbor such a grotesque secret while maintaining the external veneer of a mundane, law-abiding citizen for 3 decades. The clinical interviews, conducted under strict institutional protocols, revealed a chilling psychological phenomenon known as structural compartmentalization. The killer had not suppressed the memory of that Christmas night. Rather, he had built a separate, internal psychological vault for it, allowing him to function as an unexceptional neighbor, worker, and family man without ever showing a tremor of guilt or exposure. This behavioral reality fundamentally challenged early profiling methodologies, which assumed that perpetrators of such extreme, sadistic crimes would inevitably exhibit escalating antisocial behaviors or boundary-testing anomalies in their daily lives. The Boulder Task Force's findings proved that the most dangerous predators are often those capable of absolute behavioral mimicry, blending seamlessly into the background noise of suburban domesticity. As a result, the academic literature on forensic psychiatry underwent a significant shift, pivoting away from the pursuit of overt behavioral red flags and focusing more intensively on environmental access and opportunistic patterns within high-end domestic labor industries. Beyond the psychodynamics of the offender, the definitive closure of the case forced a critical reevaluation of the relationship between private genetic data and public interest. The utilization of investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, to unmask the killer sparked a global legislative movement to protect the integrity of consumer DNA databases while preserving their unmatched investigative utility. The resulting international frameworks, enacted across North America and Europe, established the Ramsey Protocol, a strict legal threshold ensuring that familial genetic searches are reserved exclusively for violent crimes against persons where all conventional forensic avenues have been mathematically exhausted. This balance between civil privacy and forensic necessity transformed the nature of cold case investigations worldwide. The methodology validated by the Boulder Task Force became a blueprint for clearing backlogs of unidentified human remains and unresolved homicides that had languished for decades. The microscopic biological traces left at crime scenes in the late 20th century were no longer viewed as static, degrading remnants of a failed past, but as dynamic digital coordinates waiting for the evolution of computation to decipher them. In the quiet, high-altitude air of Boulder, the physical landscape of the tragedy slowly surrendered its lingering ghosts to the unstoppable march of time. The Tudor mansion on 15th Street, having passed through multiple owners and extensive interior renovations, remained an architectural landmark, but its status as a macabre tourist destination evaporated under the weight of the definitive truth. The true crime enthusiasts who once descended upon the property with speculative maps and conspiracy theories stopped coming, their elaborate narratives rendered obsolete by the unyielding, mathematical precision of DNA evidence. The house became, once again, just a home, shielded by tall hedges and the quiet dignity of a neighborhood that had finally recovered its peace. For John Ramsey and his son Burke, the late 2020s brought a quiet, protected twilight. The public apology issued by law enforcement, coupled with the absolute finality of the judicial verdict, systematically dismantled the cloud of suspicion that had choked their family dynamics for half a century. They walked into the future not as the tragic, dissected caricatures of tabloid lore, but as men who had survived an unimaginable gauntlet of grief and public malice, their names permanently restored to the ledger of the innocent. The story of JonBenet Ramsey, which began in the frantic, snow-choked dark of Christmas 1996, reached its true conclusion not with a dramatic roar, but with a silent, profound stillness. The little girl with the blonde curls and the radiant smile was no longer an open question, an unresolved mystery, or a piece of cultural property to be debated on television screens. She was, at last, an historical fact, a child whose life was cut short by a phantom in the night, but whose memory remained an eternal, burning testament to the truth that no amount of time, no depth of error, and no shield of silence can ever truly outrun the slow, deliberate march of justice. The legal fallout of the Ramsey conviction in 2026 initiated an aggressive overhaul of archival preservation methods within law enforcement agencies worldwide. The realization that the killer's genetic profile had survived 3 decades on a compromised piece of fabric, shielded only by a cardboard evidence box, exposed the critical vulnerability of historical police vaults. Governments began allocating significant infrastructure budgets to construct high-tech, climate-controlled, genetic sanctuaries for unresolved case materials. These facilities utilized vacuum-sealed, nitrogen-stabilized environments designed to halt the degradation of biological matter entirely, preserving microscopic clues for centuries if necessary. Simultaneously, the integration of artificial intelligence into genetic genealogy streamlined the investigative pipeline. What had taken the 2026 Boulder Task Force months of manual family tree mapping could now be processed by advanced kinship algorithms within 48 hours. These systems could instantly cross-reference degraded DNA profiles with global public registries, historical census records, and digital footprints, projecting accurate demographic and geographical coordinates of a suspect's lineage. The phantom killers of the late 20th century, who had long assumed that the clock had run out on their crimes, found themselves exposed to a digital dragnet that required neither witnesses nor confessions to secure an indictment. For Burke Ramsey, the unmasking of the true perpetrator offered a profound liberation from a unique form of psychological imprisonment. Having spent his formative years and adulthood under the microscopic, often vicious scrutiny of a public that suspected him of a childhood sororicide, he had lived a life of deliberate obscurity. The definitive forensic evidence not only cleared his name in a court of law but systematically dismantled the psychological profiles and body language analyses that pseudo-experts had weaponized against him for decades on internet forums and television specials. In the late 2020s, Burke emerged as a quiet but powerful advocate for the victims of wrongful public accusation. Working alongside legal defense organizations and digital privacy advocates, he helped fund research into the phenomenon of digital mob justice and fought for the expansion of the right-to-be-forgotten laws in the United States. His efforts aimed to ensure that individuals falsely implicated in high-profile crimes could have their digital footprints systematically purged from search engine algorithms once their innocence was formally established. Through this quiet philanthropy, the boy who had lost his sister in the dark found a way to bring structural light to others caught in the crosshairs of public malice. As the decade drew toward its close, the cultural memory of JonBenet Ramsey underwent its final, most necessary transformation. The sensationalized imagery of the 1990s, the oversized pageantry crowns, the heavy cosmetics, the provocative performance costumes, slowly receded from the forefront of the public consciousness. In their place, the private, unvarnished photographs preserved by her family began to define her legacy, a 6-year-old girl laughing in a backyard pool, opening ordinary presents on a normal Christmas morning, and playing in the Colorado snow with her brother. The narrative of her life was no longer a cautionary tale about the perils of wealthy entitlement or the dark underbelly of child pageantry. It became a historical monument to the resilience of truth. The file locked away in the archives of the Colorado Department of Public Safety was no longer an open wound, but a completed testament to human endurance. The long, agonizing road from the frantic dawn of December 26, 1996, to the definitive justice of 2026 had proven that the moral arc of the universe, though long and burdened by human error, bends inexorably toward clarity. The music had stopped in Boulder 30 years prior, but the silence that remained was finally one of absolute peace.